And welcome to the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, May the 18th, 2026. It is now 6 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order, and we only have the one item on this evening's agenda, and with regard to the satisfaction of the TIF at the Galleria, and I will turn that over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. As we come up on the end of the useful life of the TIF at Galleria on the south side, well, in the north side as well, we are experiencing some good news that we wanted to share with the council relative to some extraordinary income that we are going to be that we have received, as a matter of fact, in the last couple of weeks from there. So with that, I'm going to have Ms. Williams kind of give a detailed outline of what's going on as far as sources of funds are concerned. Ms. Williams.
Good evening. I'm going to kind of read my information so I don't go astray. Annually, the pilot payments for businesses in the Galleria TIF are collected by the county collector and distributed to the city. I track all payments by project area. There's actually 3 project areas in the Galleria TIF, and I allocate them according to the TIF plan because one is different than the other 2. The allocation includes pilots that are paid to the TIF trustee special allocation fund and surplus pilots that are distributed back to all of the taxing jurisdictions. Those taxing jurisdictions include the school district, South Metro Fire Department, Cass County Road and Bridge, Cass County Library, Cass Regional Medical, and the Cass County Shelter. The surplus pilot for the city is contributed to the TIF for repayment of the additional TIF bonds. This was part of the TIF agreement. It's Bill 2784, Second Amendment. That was from 2012. From 2014 through 2026, the amount of city surplus pilots contributed were $368,916.46. It's averaging approximately $31,000 per year. The Galleria TIF debt service payments are due each May and November. The principal and interest, which is the larger payment, is due May 1st each year. That comes after property tax, much like the city's debt service payments are set up. All monies in the revenue fund on the 40th day prior to the payment due date are applied by the trustee according to Section 402 of the trust indenture. The funds represent mainly the monies in the special allocation funds, which is EATS, economic activity taxes, and pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, as well as interest that's earned on these funds. So monthly, we transfer the EATS that are collected from sales tax to the trustee, and then annually, it depends on how the payments are received, but for sure one payment per year for the pilots as they all come in January. The trustee allocates funds according to the trust indenture. We typically refer to this as the waterfall. The funds that were available to allocate for May 1st, 2026 include the following. $3,328,425.76 were on hand for allocation. And in the order of waterfall, that's how the trustee distributes the funds. Some things in that order are already paid off or just are not applicable in every distribution, but these are the things that were distributed this May. $2,250 was a trustee fee. $1,514,000 was the principal and interest that was due on May 1st, according to the amortization schedule. $91,778.13. That's the interest that's due on November 1st, so they allocate that ahead of time to make sure those funds are available for debt service. And then there was $365,272.57 that was reimbursed to the developer. That's Block and Company. And then $330,835.32. The reason I wanted to discuss this evening, that was reimbursed to the city for the city's surplus pilots that were pledged to the trustee. $1,020,000 was redeemed, a portion of the bonds early. So because of the excess funds on hand, they were able to redeem bonds early in a significant amount. The amount distributed to the city was an unknown for our fiscal year 26 budget process. This is why we did not budget this one-time revenue. The developer submitted reimbursable costs last September for the area to the north of 58 Highway. We know that as Project Area 3. where they completed site work last spring and summer. That's back behind the car wash and scooters, that area they graded, et cetera. The developer could have submitted more expenses to be certified up until the 40th day prior to debt service payments. The developer is ahead of the city in that waterfall distribution, so if they would have submitted things, that would have prioritized their reimbursement over ours. So still something that we wouldn't be able to conservatively estimate as a one-time revenue. As of May 1st, 2026, the city has been reimbursed 100% of our surplus pilot contribution. The funds are not needed to make any of the remaining TIF bond payments. The principal outstanding on the Galleria TIF bond is currently $2,395,000. The amount of funds in all of the trustee accounts as of May 12th, that was last week, I received them from the trustee, is $2,117,169. And we actually have a little over $300,000 on hand of each that have been collected that we'll be distributing to them this month. The trustee anticipates that the TIF bonds will be paid off in the early summer. But as I just mentioned, the amount of money we have to transfer, that's going to be equal to the amount of the debt service that's still due on that, or a little bit greater. This is 2 years earlier than the original amortization schedule because we anticipated this to be in 2028. I've been working with Gilmore and Bell, and as well as Mr. Fearborn, they're our Economic Development Council, on what the next steps are once these bonds are paid off and how the TIF starts to close. And so when those funds become available back to 100% to the city and back on the tax rolls for all of the property tax, for all of the taxing jurisdictions to receive their 100% versus 50%. That concludes my staff report.
Griller. If you have any questions. We have been working very, very careful with bond counsel on this. The fact that we're going to be winding down and sunsetting a TIF where the retailers have served the community for all of these years, and very little turnover up there with the major ones, and the turnover has been a quality turnover. You usually don't hear about TIFs closing out 2 years early, and you sure don't hear about them closing out with surplus available to the city. Technical term for this is, and I always hate to use it because it sounds a little weird, but these funds are actually cleansed. There's no obligations associated with these funds that are coming to us from the developer who's in front of us, as Ms. Williams indicated, on the waterfall. So the upshoot of it is that we have an unbudgeted extraordinary income, one-time income, because we can't predict next year what's going to happen, of $330,835.32. It's going to be my recommendation to the council that because it is an extraordinary income with no obligations on the city's part to it, that we place it into the reserve revenue fund. And then we have two thoughts for it. One in the very, very near term and one in the longer term. Several of the council members, for the near term use of these funds, several of the council members know that the park board and parks have been working on potential, the fact that the southern part of the Good Parkway Trail washes out. We have been working on, and the park board has made first reading on, both a study on what could be happening on the southern part of the trail to alleviate that flooding, as well as, and more importantly, in the near term, what to do about the trail down there and how to move the trail and make that trail usable, what their recommendations are going to be on that. The council will actually be seeing that portion of it at your next regularly scheduled meeting. The longer term, but still associated with that particular study, is at the time we asked GBC, what about an expanded study to look at that entire western watershed that runs all the way up to 58 Highway? We hear a lot of citizen concerns about that. I think one of the things we can all agree on, especially since now we're looking at a revised forecast of 2 to 3 inches of rain again tonight, it does seem like we get intense rains more than we used to. That 1% rain up to the 40% rain seems to come a lot more. The last study was done when we only considered 1% rains and the timeframes that were associated with that. We would be proposing within this expanded study, and GBC has already given us a price for it, we would be proposing to look at the new hydrology that would be associated with more frequent rains, heavier rains in a shorter period of time, stream bank stabilization, what needs to happen all the way to 58 Highway, if they would have any recommendations for changes that could go in there. That would be one part of use of funds that we would be proposing almost immediately within the budget year. Second thing is, and we've been talking about this for about a year now, we are approaching the 40th amendment to the Unified Development Code. We would propose going out and having an independent review of the UDC, and I don't want to call it a complete rewrite, but pretty close to a complete rewrite by experts who would be consulting with us. That would be more than likely restricted revenue set aside and proposed within the budget timeframe for next year. We would be pulling those out of the restricted revenue funds. Just kind of want to, yeah, source of funds, it's already happened. They're in there. We've accounted for them. Use of funds coming up is more of a recommendation, not looking for anything from the council tonight. We'll get you a lot more detail when we're actually bringing those items to you. Any questions, be happy to answer.
You indicated you had a cost for the study already. Is that something you want to wait to
The,
share?
the expanded study, right now we're estimating about $78,000. It is a huge study when you get all the way up to 58. We're not looking at, now it wouldn't include, that wouldn't include any costs associated with doing something. The park board one you're going to see is a little bit more than that, but it includes the costs of actually studying what's going to be done with the trail itself. But when we start getting into those areas north and up into 58 and that development that's already in, and again, GBC, we're getting that good of a price on it. Anything over the size of a bread box is always high to me, but anything in that range, you're wanting to be sure that you're getting everything done for that, including the hydrology, including stream bank stabilization recommendations. All of that would be encompassed in that for the entire watershed now, north to south.
And the UDC, an approximate?
Looking at others that have been done, just the UDC component would be a not to exceed $150,000, we believe. And it could be, you see a huge range on those.
Sure.
Depending on how much interaction with council down the road and how much, you know, they're going to be interacting with staff as they're doing it. And we want that rather than just going off in isolation to address some of those items.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Baker?
As far as like, I support both of those because they're near and dear, but if we do the extended study on the watershed, how would that play into the existing contract we have on trail redesign if potentially they may say, hey, we've got to push even more water to the south? Is that going to kind of coincide with what park boards do?
It would absolutely coincide with that, sir, because they're going to be starting their process with the study. So this would just all be incorporated in together. I actually think we're getting a better price on the north than just because we're adding it to the south. And it makes sense. I mean, why would we be figuring out what's going on down here if we're not looking at the source? So.
Mr. Burke?
Just a quick historical question about the trail. Before What year did we put that trail in? I can't remember. In my brain, it's always been there, but I know it.
Mr. Mustine? Thank you.
Okay. Wow.
I can say this because I don't have to look at Mr. Mustine, and he can just stare at the back of my head while I'm saying it. Parkway trails are a danger. When you're putting a trail in next to a creek, we hear things about, if you've ever been to Grandview and seen where their dog park is, it's right next to a creek, it's in a floodplain, equipment is constantly being washed out. It's a bad use, and Mr. Mustine eventually made strong recommendation to the park board, and they accepted it, that we would not accept land like this again in a linear park format, especially because two of our linear parks are located next to creeks.
Yeah, I would just want clarification on that because I couldn't remember what the idea was before it was originally put in. And I know one of the linear parks closer to my neighborhood, I don't know how I could get to it other than walk through the middle of the creek. I don't know if that would be legal. But anyway, thanks.
As part of the development contribution green space. Mr. Holman?
So two things. I concur with Mr. Baker's comments. I think both of these are very worthy projects, especially with some of the issues that we've experienced from the city down there. The UDC is getting long in the tooth. It is time to relook at that. But to give you a little bit of cover on the not accepting parks land next to creeks, Mr. Barber reminded me of Indian Creek and several other areas. This is a common practice that's gone around in this area and other cities for years. It's land they don't want to fool with, so this is what they give to us in return. So, but I think we're well suited, especially with the stuff related to rains and flooding and the hydrology. That's forward thinking because that's not just today, that's for the future. So I think it's a good move.
Mr. Barber, did you have something? Oh, I thought I saw your hand up. Okay. Mr. McDonald?
Thank you. In regards to the additional or larger study, would we also look into impacts of future development of those parcels there on the west side and how, obviously we don't want to have to go back and do this again, here in several years as we see more development there, through Ward 1 on that west side and down Dean.
It
So-
absolutely requires that.
Okay.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, the old study, and I found this really interesting, the old study for a number of the locations that have now been built out, when they were considering the water flow and the water flow patterns and everything that was going to go on, it did not account for on-site detention. And when you think about what's going on, even with on-site detention, definitely time for a new study. Because they were saying that that floodplain was adequate down there, which fortunately no houses have gotten the water, but the floodplain is definitely being used a lot. That original study said there's not going to be any on-site detention up here, and that floodplain is adequate, is just something needs to be looked at again.
Well, FEMA's even updated the floodplain lines as
They-
well over the
they
past
have.
10 years.
They have.
Quite a bit, actually.
And a whole lot of those homeowners then applied for the passes that you can get from them to have their houses removed from the floodplain so they don't have to pay floodplain insurance. So there have been a whole lot of map reviews done down there that it'll be nice to get a global look.
Amen. Just McDonald.
Two other things. I was having a conversation with a resident not too far from me who kind of backs up to that area. And when they originally built or purchased their house, at least from what I was told, they weren't required flood insurance, and now are. Could this potentially remedy some of that for residents that this has affected over time?
It will eventually depend on what staff and ultimately the council decide. A good example, the rate of flood there are some subjective things that can be put in here that get adopted into code. What are we gonna consider to be a 1% flood? What are we, those are in there. It should, stay tuned on that one. So,
Okay, yeah, understood.
Perspective, going out to do those FEMA map amendments, it's documentation that if they were able to produce from the city, here's the resource and the report that we have received, it's additional evidence they can use in order to go about readjusting what those FEMA setback lines are for them. So a map adjustment, basically.
Okay, thanks. In this as well, is there opportunity to potentially, partner with the state or some federal funding in the redo of this area?
So DNR will have grants available. That's going to be for action items. And one of the things you always see with a study like this is it's going to come back with recommendations. And some of those recommendations are going to be possibly that we may be surprised. But I've never seen a study like this come back without some recommendations. And sometimes when you're dealing with stormwater, they can be pretty expensive. They become, and that, thus what do we actually want to be prepared for? Because you can't prepare for everything. What size storm do you want to be prepared for? And what are you going to be willing to accept that comes on the back end of that? Because you could be looking at millions of dollars in projects on something like this. DNR, it could make a Corps of Engineers. I see every week DNR giving grants out, but it is to eligible projects, obviously, where the city in question can't afford them, and we may be there.
Yeah, understood. One more question, and I think that's all I have, is I know, original timeline that was discussed was potential resolution within a 12-month period of approximately now. With additional study, et cetera, does that increase that anticipated timeline, or does that affect that in any way?
It does not. It
At
does
least
not, sir.
to our current knowledge.
I would like to have the study in front of the council with at least a plan, like a CIP plan associated with it for the next budget year.
Mr. Barber, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. This is kind of goes on with Mr. McDonald's question about flood insurance. And I'm thinking, hasn't the standards for floodplains changed in the past few years? Haven't they expanded? Wasn't that kind of some of the issues that we dealt with, some of the areas? Now the floodplains have expanded?
They have, in some areas, expanded and in some areas been cut back.
So it's dynamic.
It is a very dynamic situation. And again, developers are all the time petitioning about floodplains and waterways. And you may remember during the landfill fight, one of the big delays that helped us and delayed the Monheisers was dealing with just this sort of thing.
Anybody else have anything? All right. More to follow, that's for sure. Anything else to come before the group tonight? You have anything else? Oh, yeah, just want to remind everybody, June 8th is when the resolution will be there that'll outline the Charter Commission setup and a timeline. Just want to let you know in case there was a question about that. All right. There's none.